Proclamation designating May 5th, 2022 as National Day of Prayer in Glynn County for all our nation's leaders and military service personnel. Whereas we remain in the most perilous times as our President and all our nation's leaders seek to protect and preserve the values of freedom, justice, and democracy for American people and the people of the world. And whereas courageous men and women from across the country and many countries around the world have been called to action to serve as protectors and hold firm in the face of this evil. And whereas we hold firm our responsibility to support the families and loved ones of those dedicated men and women, asking God's protection and mercy upon them as they discharge their solemn duty. And whereas humbly we ask that our prayers sustain our President, Joseph Biden, and protect and provide for him, for those who are in command of our armed forces, for all our nation's leaders, that they will have wisdom and strength and a certainty of purpose that will guide them in our most trying hours. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Glynn County Board of Commissioners that today, Thursday, May 5th, 2022, is hereby designated as a National Day of Prayer in Glynn County, as we unite in faith, strength, and support of our President, our nation's leaders, and the young men and women of the United States military and coalition forces, as they do what is necessary to protect our people, our land, and our freedom, where we are one nation under God. Please join me in prayer. Most gracious and loving Father, we come before you carrying on a tradition that started back in 1775, that as a nation we are called to come before you and acknowledge our need humbly for your guidance. And Father, as we gather tonight to conduct the business of this county, we are reminded of your goodness and faithfulness to our community. That in the last 2 years, through this pandemic, with so many lives that have been affected by what has happened, Father, you have brought us to the other side. That when we had a cargo ship turn over in our channel, and there could have been tremendous disaster environmentally and economically, Father, you protected us from that. And Father, even in the tragic death of Ahmaud Arbery, when this country was looking for this community to self-destruct, to come apart at the seams, Father, you protected us, and you gave us brotherly love for one another to get through to the other side. And God, as we come before you tonight, we look back at your goodness to us as we've gone through these events and many others. We acknowledge, Father, though, that as we go forward, we still need your protection and guidance. We ask, Father, that you would protect and keep us, to protect our community, protect our leaders and guide them from our president on down to those who serve on the county commissions throughout this country. Help us, Father, to be peacemakers, to make wise decisions that bring justice to every situation. We give you the glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Since we have no one speaking during the public comment period, I'd ask that, do we have any additions or subtractions from the agenda tonight?
Mr. Chairman, I move to add item 8.1 to the published consent agenda to approve the quote and statement of work with Axon Enterprise, Inc. for Axon Standard Service and Software at no additional cost.
Second. We have a motion to add 8.1 and a second. Any further discussion, Commissioners? All in favor, raise your right hand. That's added to the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I move to pull item number 26 from the consent agenda, personnel.
Second. We have a motion by Commissioner Brunson, a second by Commissioner Booker to pull item 26 from the consent agenda. Any further discussion, Commissioners? All in favor, raise your right hand. That passes 6-0. We'll remove 26 from the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I then defer to add that item to a date uncertain.
We'll add item 26 to a date uncertain, and that is the motion. Do we have a second? Second. We have a motion by Commissioner Brunson, a second by Commissioner Booker. further discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. That passes 6-0.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve consent agenda general business, consent agenda finance, and consent agenda personnel, with the exception of any item that a commissioner wishes to remove for discussion.
Second.
All right, we have a motion for consent agenda items. And second, is there any item that any commissioner wishes to pull for discussion? Hearing none, seeing none. All in favor, raise your right hand. Consent agenda is approved. We'll move to general business. Under general business, before we get started, I want to make sure that we're going to make one slight change. Item 32 and 31 will be switched. 31 will be heard after 32. Item 27, general business. Consider accepting the project funding agreement between the Glynn County Board of Commissioners and Coastal Community Health Services Agency, subject to the county attorney's approval. Ms. Munson.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is a request that we have had from the, can you help me with the coastal, I'm sorry, I don't have my notes. Coastal Healthcare System to provide some ARPA funding. And this funding is to be used to fund disproportionately impacted individuals who suffered limited access to medical services during the COVID pandemic. So again, this is ARPA funding. So we're just asking tonight that we revise the motion so that we can have it continue to be worked on by the attorney's office until we can come to an agreement that we're all in favor of. So we're just asking for your support to continue working on this, and we will bring it back before you for approval once the agreement is completed.
Mr. Chairman, I move to authorize county staff and attorney's office to continue working on a project funding agreement between the Glynn County Board of Commissioners and Coastal Community Health Services Agencies using ARPA funding, which will be brought back to the Board of Commissioners for final approval at a later date.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion for item 27 and a second motion by Commissioner Brunson and a second by Commissioner Rafalski. Is there any further discussion, Commissioners?
I would just add that this was a request from the city initially for us to match this request, and they approved theirs last night.
In my understanding is we're working on the wording. Is that correct, Mr. Mumford?
Also, my understanding from talking to Mr. Stewart earlier today was that they did not approve it last night, but approved to continue writing the agreement. I don't know if that was a miscommunication or not, but that's why we changed ours to match that as well.
Okay. Commissioners, go ahead, Mr. Mumford. Did you have a comment?
I was going to say that we may end up doing a joint agreement with the city. So we'll have one agreement with them, and we're having to create the agreement on this one. So it's not a review, it's a creation of a new document.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, we'll call for a vote. All in favor, raise your right hand. That motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Ms. Munson. Item 28, CPU 4982, Southern Retreat RV Park, Phase 3. Request for a conditional use permit for a recreation vehicle RV park at 7515 Blythe Island Highway, parcel number 02-00723. The approximate 14 acres property is zoned highway commercial, and an RV park is a conditional use in the highway commercial zoning district. Chris Amos, CSEC Inc., agent for Mario Garcia, Southern Retreat RV Park LLC applicant, and Merrimack Communications LLC owner. This item was deferred from the April 21st meeting. I believe we had the public hearing at that time. Is that correct, Ms. Leaf?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Please give us an update of where we stand on it.
Okay, great. Stephanie Leaf, Planning Manager. Yes, sir, the public hearing was held on April 21st, and the direction from the board was to have the applicant and the applicant's agent, as well as some members of the Majestic Oaks homeowners, to work together, and also representation from the county, to work together and talk about the buffer that's along the Majestic Oaks property line. So just to reorient you, this is Blythe Island Highway here. This is the proposed RV park. In this area, they have a 50-foot natural buffer, and they were also proposing an 8-foot privacy fence. The group did get together right after the last meeting. I know Commissioner Tossenson was present at that meeting. And what was discussed, and generally there was consensus that the addition of clumping bamboo would help to create a natural privacy fence. And the discussion was that a fence would not necessarily be required by the county. If the applicants end up wanting to put up a fence in the future, they could. The county would not necessarily require that if that is the direction of the board. So that was generally what was the consensus. And so we did revise your possible action that the condition of clumping bamboo is planted within the 50-foot buffer adjacent to the Majestic Oaks subdivision. And a fence along this property line is optional but not required by the county. So that is the update that I have for your information, and I'm not sure if you want to hear from the applicant or Commissioner Tossenson if there's any additional details on that.
Mr. Chairman, again, I'm going to abstain from discussion or voting on this item as I have a conflict of interest in the financing package.
Okay, Commissioner Brunson will abstain from this item. Are there any comments or questions for Ms. Leaf, or any comments?
Stephanie, did the planning commission call for the 8-foot fence? Or was that something they had just agreed to?
The applicants had agreed to that, so that was their proposal. So it is in line with what they had proposed for phase 2 of the RV park. They also have an 8-foot privacy fence. So the planning commission did approve a site plan and made the recommendation on that 8-foot fence, but that came from the applicant originally, not the planning commission.
Okay, thank you.
If I can clear up, we had a meeting and we discussed it with the Majestic people, and we had it actually at the RV park along with the engineer. They felt, and I tend to agree with them, that Mr. Garcia was going to put in bamboo throughout, still leave the area for the trucks to get in from Glynn County to be able to maintain the ditch. But in the wooded area, he was going to put a thick hedge of bamboo in, and with a height of possibly 20 feet or more. The Majestic Oaks folks were very accepting to that, and with that being said, that they said, well, the fence would not be needed because at a certain point, the growth would be so thick that they would not be able to see the RV park at any time, and they were willing to give it time to grow, and so everybody was in agreement with it, and so we walked out of that with everybody shaking hands, and everybody was happy with everybody, so we're on board with that.
Well, that's quite impressive. You got everybody happy on that.
I know.
mean, that's impressive. I am send you out more often. With that being said, do you have any, there's our motion, or?
Stephanie, is the motion on the bottom the one that would apply to what our conversations were?
Yes, sir. It has been modified based on the
Okay.
conversation you all had.
And Mr. Garcia, y'all are all happy with this? Okay. Majestic Oaks, I don't know if any representatives are here, but I know that they said that if that was the agreement, then there wouldn't be any need for them to come tonight when we sat down at the meeting. So I move to approve CUP 4982 with the conditions that clumping bamboo planting within the 50-foot buffer adjacent to the Majestic Oaks subdivision, and fence along the property line in options but not required by optional but not required by the county.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second? A motion by Commissioner Tossenson, a second by Commissioner Booker. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. That passes 5-0 with one abstention.
Abstain.
All right, item 29. TA 4764, Beach and Dune Protection Ordinance Amendment. County-initiated request to amend Glynn County Zoning Ordinance Section 727, Beach and Dune Protection, to reduce the development setback line areas with an active, stable dune sequence to increase the development setback line for areas without an active, stable dune sequence, to transfer several conditional uses to permitted uses and for other purposes. This item was deferred from April 21st, 2022 meeting. Ms. Leaf.
Thank you. Stephanie, Planning Manager. This public hearing for this item was held on April 21st, and the commission did defer it to this agenda. There was direction to look at what we were proposing as some changes to the permitted and conditional uses, and to no longer propose those changes, to go back to what is currently on the book. So what the ordinance currently says in regard to permitted and conditional uses. So the county staff has made that change. So there is a revised draft ordinance that was in your packet, and also have it on the screen tonight if there's any questions. And these are your possible motions for tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions, and Senior Assistant County Attorney Will Worley is also here tonight, who's involved in the drafting, if you have any questions of him.
Commissioners, are there any questions concerning this? I think he's on mute.
I have a comment I'd like to make in reference to this. The DNR already has these setbacks in place, is that correct? And that's a state requirement.
Correct. Yeah, the 25-foot setback is what the state currently requires.
Me speaking individually, I don't see why the county should be involved in these setbacks when they're already in place on the state level. Seems to be redundant to me. Seems to be that it's something that it's another layer of something that taxpayers have to already deal with. They're already dealing with the state on setbacks, so why would they have to deal with the county on setbacks? If they're in line with each other, then why would we even need an ordinance that would apply to something that's already in place?
Sure. So basically the information regarding that particular request is that when we did start talking about some changes we wanted to make to this ordinance, there was some interest from commissioners to still have the county weigh in on certain types of projects. So if you might recall the Coast Cottages beach crossover or Dune crossover project, that was one that the county had a lot of interest in and wanted to be able to weigh in on a project like that. And so if we were to repeal this ordinance and only have the state ordinance, the county would not really have as much of a say in that. So that was kind of where we came from on these, was that there were some projects that the county still wanted to be able to have some authority over.
I can talk a little bit to that, Commissioner Thompson. If you've sat in a lot of DNR hearings like I have, they're more technical. The public's not usually in attendance. Anything that's done on the beaches of St. Simons and Sea Island can be projects like rock revetments, changes that could have an impact down beach, down river, down inlet. And it just provides us to give the public an opportunity to comment on projects of concern and their impacts, and then carry those recommendations from us to the DNR. So that's really the purpose. It's to allow citizens to have a voice through the county commission and the commission to the DNR. And there have been a lot of projects that change the contour of the beaches, that impact a lot of issues. It's not just a setback for porch and decks, but things can come up. So that was the reason that I felt like it was our obligation to provide citizens an opportunity to voice that to the commission.
I understand that, but once the requirements are met, there's going to be, it's still redundant. It's still the same requirements for the state and the county. So I just don't see the need for the repetitiveness. They're going to have to go before the DNR to get this approval. And the approval will be the same for the state as it is for the county. Of course, there's public comment, but I'm sure there's public comment before the DNR as well.
Well, I slightly disagree with you, having, again, been a part of a lot of DNR hearings. It's not the same. What we send in a recommendation to the DNR may not be the same as the applicant is wanting, and that would be based on concerns by the general public. So again, I just encourage you to, if it's not a combative issue or not an issue of concern, it'll come in here and pass right on through. But if it is an issue of concern, which beach for nourishment, a lot of other issues I can think of my whole life on the beach, and on that beach there can be a lot of issues of concern. And that's my goal, is to provide citizens, which I feel like we as commissioners should do, is to give them an opportunity to have that voice.
Well, I agree with the, I'm not going back and forth, but if the conditions are the same, I don't have a problem with it. I'm just trying to streamline the system a little bit so that the taxpayers of Glynn County really don't have to come back again and again asking for the same thing from one agency to another government agency. I'm just trying to streamline it in the most simplest way. The ordinances, we're working on ordinances now, and we're trying to get rid of the low-hanging fruit and some other things that don't apply. It seems to me this would be one of them that wouldn't apply because it's already in effect. That's where I'm staying. I don't have a problem with the ordinance because they are in line with each other. It just seems to me it's just a repetitiveness and something that that the taxpayers or the property owners have to deal with. And one more thing they have to deal with when they're trying to do something on their property. Thank you.
Ms. Lee, for the permitted uses and the excuse me, conditional uses, do they parallel the state? They must not, because we just changed them.
Right. So there are some differences in the uses and how they're handled in the state, and yeah, because there was some language that was incorporated in the draft code that paralleled the state a little more, and with this change that you have in front of you tonight, it goes back to what we currently have on the books. So and I don't know if there's anything you want to add about the uses. See if Mr. Worley has anything regarding the parallel with the state on the uses.
I think Stephanie's correct, and I think to Commissioner Fendig's point, I think the review at the DNR level, is my understanding, is a more technical review versus the actual use. So, for example, the recent example of Coast Cottages, they were asking for a Dune crossover. I think DNR is going to look at that and say, let's look at your specs, let's look at your technical plans here, and so long as it doesn't violate the statute, you're going to get approval, whereas I think the certain commissioners and the board, when that application came through, had some more concerns about the length of the crossover, things like that. So there are some differences in that sense where, this board may look at some different criteria when these applications come through versus what the DNR is looking at, which is, I think, a more technical review. And this board maybe looks sometimes at more like, how does that affect the neighbors or the public as a whole, that sort of thing. And I think one of the other issues too with the board having a view of it, and the caveat of this, of course, is like, it's the board's prerogative if y'all want to have this ordinance or not. I think there's been a concern in the past by past boards that a major project like a renourishment or a jetty or something could be put out somewhere along the beach on St. Simons or Sea Island, and the board would not really have a role in reviewing that or have a voice in that kind of matter.
Thank you, Mr. Worley. Commissioners, any more comments? If not, do we have a motion?
Yes, I approve the ordinance amendment as presented pursuant to Section 1107 of the Glynn County zoning ordinance.
Could I get that maybe in a little better form of an emotion, Mr. Fendig? Mr. Fendig.
Well, I make a motion to approve the ordinance amendment as presented.
On May 5th.
Oh, excuse me, all right. I'm looking at here. I changed a little bit. On May 5th, 2022.
All right, we have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Motion by Commissioner Fendig, a second by Commissioner Rafalski. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. That passes unanimously, 6-0. Item number 30, public hearing. Public hearings will be limited to 30 minutes for each opposing side, with 5 minutes allocated to each individual speaker. Comments are to be limited to relevant information regarding your position and should avoid being repetitious. If your group has a spokesperson, please allow that individual to present your group's position in time allocated. Your cooperation in this process is greatly appreciated. Item 30, consider the issuance of a 2022 provisional alcohol beverage license to Mr. P. Patel of Champa 71 LLC, DBA Liquor Warehouse, 309 Gateway Center Boulevard, Brunswick, Georgia. The license is to sell distilled spirits, malt beverages, and wines not for consumption on premise of a retail package store. Sunday sales permitted. Mr. Patel, licensee. The provisional license does not entitle the applicant to sell alcohol beverages until all necessary work at the premises have been inspected and approved by Glynn County, a certificate of occupancy issued, and the alcohol beverage license issued by the license officer. Chief.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Board of Commissioners. Mr. Pankaj Kumar Pete Patel is present for Champa 71 LLC, doing business as Liquor Warehouse, and meets the requirements for an issuance of a license for the sale of alcohol, sir.
Mr. Patel, if you mind my understanding, I'm sorry I did not pronounce your first name properly, so please forgive me for that. All right. Then we'll start with the public hearing. Are there any of those who are opposed to the issuance of this alcohol license? If so, will you please step forward and state your name for the record? And so we'll begin the public hearing now. Any opposed to this alcohol license? All right, we here have none that are opposed. Do we have any of those who are in favor of this license that wish to speak in favor of this license? Any of those that wish to speak? All right, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. I was supposed to do that initially. Commissioners, do we have any comments or questions in regard to this? And if not, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the issuance of the 2022 provisional alcoholic beverage license to Champa 71 LLC, DBA Liquor World, 309 Gateway Center Boulevard, Brunswick, Georgia, 31525. This is for the issuance of a provisional license pursuant to Ordinance Section 2-3-21. The provisional license is for retail package store to sell distilled spirits, malt beverages, and wines, not for consumption on premises. Sunday sales are permitted. Pete Patel, licensee.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Rafalski, a second by Commissioner Tossinson. Any further discussion, Commissioners? If not, all in favor, raise your right hand. That passes 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Patel. We will now go to item 32. Item 32. Item 32 is a public hearing, ZM 4995, St. Simons North End Plan Development District Amendment. Request for an amendment to the St. Simons North End Plan Development, PD District, as amended by ZM 4693 for approximately 24 acres. The purpose of the amendment is to expand the property governed by a previous amendment to the St. Simons North End PD, ZM 4693, to allow family estate lots on additional tracts of land. Property is located at 15, 39, 51, and 61 Alford Lane, 739 and 788 Pikes Bluff Drive, 115 Lawrence Road, and a portion of Alford Lane, St. Simons Island, parcel numbers 04-12735, 04-12348, 04-1-12736, 04-12737, 04-12738, 04-15531, 04-15532, 04-15534, and parcel 04-00215. Joey Strength, Hunter McLean Attorneys, agent for Frederica Estates LLC, owner and applicant. Ms. Leaf.
Thank you. Stephanie Leaf, Planning Manager. This is an amendment to the St. Simons North End Plan Development. There's been a few amendments to the St. Simons North End in the last couple years. This one particularly is the there has been some additional land acquisition by the applicant, and so they are looking to create what they're calling family estate lots on some additional property. So you may recall last year, there was an amendment that came through for about 900 acres of Frederica Township that created or added this additional use called family estate lot. And those are generally 7 and 20 acre parcels that can have up to 3 residences plus one guest house. They say one of the residences can have a guest house. And so it's the idea is to have a family compound where related folks can have homes within close proximity, but on the same parcel. So that was allowed as a use through that original amendment, and as I mentioned, the owners acquired additional 24 acres, and they would like to have the same uses on these parcels. So this is really the only change, is to add this family estate lot use that could be allowed on these parcels. So this zoning map is different than the one that's in your packet. We realized that there was some clarification that was needed on exactly which parcels. There were some roads that were included in the last map that, and this one just clarifies it by showing the parcels and not showing the actual roads. So this is the proposed amendment language. And then this is the full description of the family estate lots and some of the other development requirements. And then this is the master plan. It's for the St. Simons North End, so it's in compliance with the master plan and the comprehensive plan. So the Islands Planning Commission held a public hearing on April 19th, 2022. They did vote unanimously 5-0 with 2 commissioners absent to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of ZM 4995 as presented. And these are your possible actions. And Joey Strength from Hunter McLean is here representing the applicant, and I'm happy to answer questions as well. Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Leaf before we begin the public hearing? Okay.
What is the restricted elevational height in this PD? I went back through and tried to find it.
I will need to take a look at that. It might be, it's either 35 feet or 45 feet, but I can take a look at that and get back to you with an answer.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't find it.
Okay, yeah, I'll see if I can find that information.
All right, we'll begin the public hearing now. Public hearing is limited to 30 minutes to each side, so we'll begin with those who are opposed to this change in the PD text for ZM 4995. Or anyone who is opposed, please come forward. Anyone opposed? All right, we'll close that portion of the public hearing. Any of those who wish to speak in favor of this PD text change? Anyone wish to come forward and speak in favor? All right, if not, we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, any other more questions or comments? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve ZM 4995 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Brunson, a second by Commissioner Rafalski. Any further discussion, Commissioners?
Well, it was pretty quick. I was waiting for some information.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead and ask for the commission.
Yeah, I'll try to look at that real quick. I think it should be in one of the links.
And just one other question on this, Aaron, or Will. With the, issues we've had with PD text, is there a limitation, I think, that was passed of 2 years for PD text to remain as approved, or?
I'm sorry, Commissioner, could you repeat the question?
For once an approval of a PD text is made, isn't there now a 2-year expiration on that site plan?
Stephanie? Pam, maybe I'll answer that question.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Pamela Thompson, Director of Community Development. Sorry I didn't hop right up. I think we're all trying to help Stephanie find that answer for you. Commissioner Fendig, throughout the public comment period for the current Envision Glen zoning ordinance update, there has been discussion about setting an expiration or a sunset date on site plans that are approved as part of a PD text amendment. There has been no actual change to the code at this point, but that will be discussed during the upcoming review of the draft zoning ordinance and may be a change that's presented to you all in October.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson.
Sorry to hold it up, but it was quick before I could speak up and ask questions. Sure.
Commissioners, thank you. I'm Joey Strength. I'm attorney with Hunter McLean as agent for the applicant. Commissioner Fendig, I can't answer your question at the moment. The original zoning text had a 35-foot height limitation. There's an indication in my records, at least in ZM 2299, that might have been increased to a 45-foot height limitation. So it sort of predates our work on this particular text. That's why I think there's a little ambiguity on at least giving you an immediate answer to that.
Yeah, I went back through scanning a lot of my notes from various things in the past. I was unclear where that was.
And I don't want to state what it is without knowing for sure myself.
So if we kept it at 35 feet, is that a problem for your application?
I think I don't think that there's, I'm not saying that it is 35 feet. It may be 45 foot under ZM 2299, and I cannot make an amendment to the proposal that we have before you today. The request right now is merely to add additional land to an already PD text of over 900 acres, and this expansion of that includes areas that were on the map that were already surrounded by this text already, and some additional lands that were acquired.
Well, I know that. You had called and, when we had talked, I hadn't gotten my full scan of information back, so I just, it was unquestionable whether it was 35 or 45 feet, and then whether I think the consensus of informal discussions with the commissioners has been to, because of the situation that happened out at Hampton Point, is to restrict PD text, to a 2-year renewal instead of one that sat dormant for a while and then surprised all the neighbors. So.
Ms. Leaf, do you have any information?
Yes, Mr. Strink said, so the document that I'm finding on our website is the information that went to the board, and I think it was 2011, that it did request that proposal to 45 feet. I would need a little more time just to look at minutes and just make absolute confirmation that was approved. But it looks like the recommendation from the Planning Commission was 45 feet. So in that's, at this point, I mean, I'd be conservative and say it looks like it's 45 feet, but I'd need a little more time just to find that exact final PD text that, and the minutes that confirm that.
Well,
on that meeting
is it
date.
my understanding then that the additional acreage is going along with whatever the stated PD text is that is on record? Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. So it would be, if 45 feet is what it is, and that would be what would apply to these lots as well.
Okay. All right, so can someone help me here? We have a motion on the floor to approve. Is that correct? Who made that motion?
Me.
Commissioner Brunson made the motion, and I believe Commissioner Rafalski, you had a second. Is that correct? All right, so the motion is to approve ZM 4995. We had additional discussion, which we had some questions. So we need to deal with the motion on the floor. So we have a motion and a second.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
just to my other commissioners, you could withdraw that motion.
Okay. Does anyone want to withdraw their motion and second?
I could, but I'm not.
Okay. He's
The
interested.
height is going to be dictated by the original PD text. Is that not correct? And
That
so you're
is-
adding 24 acres to 900 acres. And so we're going to have a different height for 24 acres of a 900-acre PD text.
And that's what would happen. So if there was a change made tonight that you limit to 35 feet, then 24 acres would have a 35-foot height limit, and the remainder would have the
I'm not
45.
withdrawing my motion.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion, commissioners? All in favor, raise your right hand. All against? That is 5-4 and 1 against. ZM 4995 is approved. Item 31, under land use, SUP 4896, Musgrove Retreat Special Use Permit. Request for approval of a special use permit for place of public assembly event venue in the Forest Agriculture FA zoning district. Property is located at 5720 Frederica Road, St. Simons Island, parcel number 0400223. Chris Jordan, Hunter McLean, attorneys, agent for Bren Foundation, applicant, Musgrove LLC, Nancy Reynolds Bagley, and Musgrove BDB LLC owners. Ms. Leaf.
Thank you. Stephanie Leaf, Planning Manager. This is SUP 4896, this Musgrove Retreat Special Use Permit. So for many years, Musgrove Retreat has held different types of retreats and events at their property. And what this application does is formally grant them a special use permit to continue holding special events on their property. So in the Forest Agricultural Zoning District, special event venues that have weddings and reunions and events such as that are considered places of public assembly, and places of public assembly are special uses in the Forest Agricultural Zoning District. So the applicants are not making any changes to the property at this time in terms of they're not adding any new buildings or new sites. So they are planning to continue to use the property as it currently is laid out. So this is the parcel in question right here. And so there are numerous buildings and outbuildings that are on the property. And so the application did include one parcel, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So there is other parcels that surround this one with a star that are owned by the Bren Foundation, which is a similar family, but just different ownership from the parcel as part of the application. So I know at the Islands Planning Commission meeting, as well as we've gotten other questions and concerns about the distance from the site to the nearest residence. So from the parcel that is part of the application, which is 0400223, it is over 700 feet to the closest residence, which is off of Horton Way. And this is just measured from the GIS. And then this is their site layout, so where they have restroom facilities, where they have parking, where the buildings and the event spaces. There is one piece of information that came to our attention this week. There's a tennis court that's on this northern end of the parcel where the red circle is located. And our understanding is that a lot of the events tend to occur on the tennis courts. So a lot of times the band is set up there and there's reception areas set up there. And so this is used as an event space. So what we discovered this week is that the tennis courts are actually on a separate parcel from the parcel that was part of the application package. So again, this parcel, and this is just overlaid on the GIS map. So I don't know if you can tell, but these yellow lines here, these are the parcel boundaries. So the rest of the venue the larger lodge space and the other outbuildings are all part of the parcel that's subject to the application. However, these tennis courts are located on an adjacent parcel, which is a very large 300-acre property. And that was something that, as I mentioned, we found out this week. So these tennis courts are actually not part of this existing application, and because of the noticing, we cannot add the tennis courts to the application at this point because the noticing was done only for the one parcel. So we've gotten some different questions about how this application might be similar or different from other applications for special event venues that the county has approved in the past. So a few recent ones that we've taken a look at. One is Forbes Farm, which was approved in 2018, and that was a new build, a new event venue off of Lawrence Road. And so some of the conditions with that property were there were no fireworks, no overnight parking. They would need to work with the Glynn County Police Department to work on a traffic control plan. And then they had hours of operation shall cease by 11 p.m. So basically the interpretation of this is the entire event needs to be over and ending by 11 p.m. So another one that was approved in early 2020 is Captain's Bluff, and this is off of Stevens Road off of Frederica. And this map indicates the boundary in terms of the noise ordinance. So the yellow circle is a 100-foot buffer, and then this red circle is a 300-foot buffer, from kind of the center of the site. For Captain's Bluff, they do not have a building that's the event venue. They bring in tents and everything's, it's not permanent buildings that they have the events in. But they had a shut-off time of 10 o'clock p.m. for the music to be shut off. And then they do bring in kitchen facilities. They don't have a commercial kitchen on the site. Another one is Village Creek Landing. This was a planned development, so this was not a special use permit. They did that as a planned development district. And this really did not have any specific restrictions except for no aerial fireworks would be permitted. So they didn't have any restrictions on how late they could go or how late music could occur at the property. And then we were asked to include some information about Mullet Bay Restaurant down in the Pier Village. And this was not a special use permit, but of course it's a restaurant that has a lot of live music. And so this indicates, again, the yellow circle is a 100-foot buffer from the restaurant, and the red is a 300-foot buffer in terms of the noise ordinance again. So the Islands Planning Commission held a public hearing on April 19th, and they voted 4-1. So we had 1 commissioner opposed, 2 commissioners absent. They did vote in favor of recommending to the BOC approval of this with several conditions. These conditions came out of some of the concerns from the neighbors, and then the applicant's agent did approve of these conditions during the meeting. So there was a consensus from the applicant on these. So the conditions are vendors and guests will not be allowed to access Musgrove via Village Drive that goes into German Village. Placement of speakers must be away from German Village. Security and/or a police officer on site at every wedding to monitor and remediate noise issues and to comply with the county's codes and ordinances. And then these are your possible actions. And then I did include for possible motions, if you all wanted to include, if it is your desire to approve the application, if you wanted to include these additional conditions that the IPC added. Because of the new information this week about the tennis courts not being on the same parcel, I did add an additional possible condition that the tennis courts located on parcel 0400216 are not part of the application, and events are not allowed to be held on the tennis courts unless a special use permit is approved by the county for this location. So they would have to do a separate special use permit in order to use the tennis courts as an event venue space. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Chris Jordan from Hunter McLean is here representing the applicant.
Stephanie,
Yes, sir.
do they not use tents also?
At Musgrove?
Yes.
I believe they do.
Right.
Yes, sir.
How about bathroom facilities?
So the bathroom facilities that we were aware of during the review of the application that Environmental Health District reviewed was that there are bathrooms on site that they use, but we did receive some information this week that they do also bring in portable toilets for the events as well. And so I know the applicant was going to check into some additional information on some of those questions. So hopefully he can address some of those this evening.
Stephanie, and this may be something that the county attorney might need to answer, but I'm a little unclear. Do we have a decibel level setting at 300 feet? I mean, is it strictly what you can hear at 300 feet, or is it a certain level that you hear? Is it being outside your house or inside your house at 300 feet? What exactly is our ordinance?
It's plainly audible.
I'm sorry?
Plainly audible,
Plainly audible.
that's the standard. So there's not a decibel level. We used to have that, but that was harder to enforce. So now it's plainly audible beyond 300 feet, and that's between 7 and 11
Between 7 a.m.
and 11 p.m.
Okay. And so audible would be just to be able to hear the music, is that correct?
Correct.
And that's outside, just standing outside, not in your house, correct?
Correct.
Yes. Now, one other question, fireworks. That's pretty much governed by state laws, but we can implement restrictions on fireworks because, you know, that goes on all the time, and there are places that shoot them off at midnight, and my phone starts ringing.
Sure. I think there's a couple different ways you can handle that, Commissioner. I think you can handle it through this process, like you did for Forest Farm, where the board restricted fireworks, or you know, there's probably another step in the process we'll need to take for our noise ordinance, but you know, it would also apply to fireworks as it would for any other noises beyond that 300 feet between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. So if you could hear the fireworks beyond 300 feet, which many and most you would, that would be something that you could restrict beyond those times.
All right, Commissioners, any more comments or questions before we go to public hearing? All right, we'll go to the public hearing portion of this meeting. As I remind you, public hearings are limited to 30 minutes for each opposing side, with 5 minutes allocated to each individual speaker. Comments are to be limited to relevant information regarding your position and should avoid being repetitious. If your group has a spokesperson, please allow that individual to present your group's position in the time allocated. Your cooperation in this process is greatly appreciated. We will begin by those who wish to speak in regards to this special use permit. If you want to speak against it, please come forward, state your name, and we'll begin once someone comes forward.
My name is Caroline Carter. So I'm here tonight as a resident of Drummond Village and also as the president of our Village Bluff Property Owners Association. So Village Creek, Forbes Farm, and Captain's Bluff, like she mentioned, they're all event venues that are on the North Island, and each one of those event venues has properly followed the zoning rules and has their special event permit use. However, Musgrove has been operating without an event permit since at least 2012 and 2013. We're hearing a lot about the generosity of the Musgrove owners and how that somehow they should be exempt from the regulations, but noise is still noise no matter what. Excessive noise is our biggest problem as the Drummond Village residents, and it's growing as the number of weddings at Musgrove has quadrupled since 2019. And I have a chart just to show you from 2018 to 2022, this year alone, this many weddings. Noise is not adequately addressed in the agenda package, so I want to share what's really going on so you can hear it from our end. The staff report states that Musgrove is allowed to make noise until 11, but they don't mention that the county noise ordinance about the 300 feet. We've had responding officers have confirmed many times that Musgrove is indeed violating the distant limit. The fact is their music is so loud that we can actually hear it inside our homes. And my house alone is past the nearest resident that she showed, which was the Horton Way Village Drive. I'm probably close to over maybe 1,000 feet or so. So that's how loud it is. Also, the police logs show that there have been at least 3 dozen noise complaints for 8 Musgrove events in less than a year. And I've got all of these right here. The applicant letter states that they host small private events, and they continuously reference the nonprofit things that they do. But if you look at their website, it boasts that they hold up to 400 guests out there. Most of those events are taking place on those tennis courts, which I know that's something now that's been thrown in as far as where it's zoned. They do tent there, and they do restroom trailers, just to confirm that. Let's see. There are more technical issues that I'd like to address, but also wanted to mention that the April 18th letter that I submitted was not a part of the agenda package, so I do have copies of that if needed. I want to add to the record that the public notice sign that was out front of the entrance of Musgrove was taken down for 9 days out of the 15 days prior to this public hearing. Third, the application and staff report states that Musgrove permit is for a privately owned parcel, which is number 0400223. The official county address for this parcel is the 5720 Frederica Road. And then, of course, now we're talking about the most popular part is the tennis court, and that's 0400216. So I'm not sure all that's going to play into the permit. I know they have a wedding this weekend and next. All of these are on the tennis courts with tents already up. The question that I have that I know that the Island Planning Commissioner, Odessa Rooks, asked towards the end of the meeting last was, what is the protocol? If there have been so many noise complaints and the police are coming out, where are the consequences? I mean, I stated in that meeting at the IPC that I'm an event planner. I did weddings out at Musgrove back in 2013, and my wedding was shut down at 8 o'clock in the evening after 2 complaints. So why has that happened since then? I don't understand where the accountability is. The applicant claims that an ordinance doesn't apply because they give money and they provide meeting space for certain groups. But where in the ordinance do we find that conversion chart for how many donations and free event spaces for certain groups would equal the right to ignore the ordinances the rest of us have to follow? How can the applicant claim the physical Musgrove compound is a philanthropic institution while it's privately owned and classified as a single-family residential for taxes? Zoning applies to the property and not a person nor the organization. Our little neighborhood, German Village, as you all know, is being hit from all sides. Park, boat, ramp traffic issues through our neighborhood 7 days a week, proposed industrial surface mining on a neighborhood nearby, and then now this special event noise on Saturdays that starts up. Sorry. Why aren't the rules and the zonings being enforced? The Musgrove owners do not live in Glynn County or even in Georgia, but that doesn't make them exempt from our county laws and our regulations that the rest of us must live by every day. We must also live with the impacts of their operation.
Ms. Carter, if you start wrapping it up.
Okay, sorry. So we're just requesting a couple things, that the events end at 10 o'clock, not 11, that Village Drive cannot be used, as we stated the last time. They have to adhere to the ordinance of 300 feet, no fireworks, and that the permit is approved for 1 year and requires the noise ordinance compliance. Violations would lead to a permit loss. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak against this application? If so, please come forward and state your name. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak against?
I can learn to understand.
All right, since there's no one else who wishes to speak against this application, we'll close this portion of the public hearing and we'll open it for those who would like to speak in favor. Is there anyone who'd like to speak in favor of this application?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Chris Jordan. I represent the applicant, the Brin Foundation, which operates Musgrove Retreat and Conference Center. With us remotely is Nicole Bagley. She's the president of the Brin Foundation, and her family, the Bagley family, has owned this land. There's a lot of acres up there. They've owned it for over 80 years. Also with me is Bill Bergatis. Bill is the CEO of a company called Troy Acoustics. It's a Brunswick company headquartered here out by Fletsey. They specialize in noise mitigation measures. And I would like to talk about what Bill and his team can do to help solve the noise issue between the events at Musgrove, particularly at the tennis courts, and the folks at German Village. I think that's the best use of our time. Bill's here to answer questions that I can't answer, that you may have about how to fix the problem. And I'd like to get straight to how we fix the problem, but to do that, I got to skip over what I would like to say in response to a lot of what you heard. There's a history here, there's no doubt. You all have been a part of some of that history, I know. There's been history even in the 16 days since we appeared before the IPC and tonight. And if you want to talk about that, please interrupt me and we can. But I don't think we have to. I don't want to, because I will spot you that we have an issue out there. My folks know they have to follow the noise ordinance. They know they have to do that, and we think we have a plan to do that, and that's what I'd like to talk about. The noise comes primarily from the tennis courts. There are other spaces out there, and if you want to talk about that, we can, but I think primarily what they hear in German Village is music coming from the tennis courts. So what are we prepared to do about that? Well, so you heard a little bit about this, right? At the IPC, we got the public comment a few hours before the hearing. The folks at German Village wrote a letter with a couple of suggestions. We realized quite happily most of that was stuff we were prepared to do. So their suggestions became our suggestions. We presented to the IPC, and those conditions, they're not up there right now, but I can tick them off, right? We still think are totally valid, and just to frame it so everybody's on the same page. We'll have a police officer on site at every event with the authority to tell us to turn the music down. We'll face the speakers away from German Village to the south, and there'll be no Musgrove event traffic on Village Drive, which isn't really a sound thing, but it's obviously something they care about, and we're happy to speak to it. And the fourth was we'll comply with the county's laws. Okay, so that was 16 days ago. There have obviously been a lot of complaints since then, so we've still got a problem. What have we done since we found out about these complaints? Put another way, what additional conditions can we propose to try to solve this problem and still host these weddings that we have? We will, as a condition of the granting of a permit, retain a noise mitigation consultant to design and install and then test noise mitigation measures to make sure we are compliant with the noise ordinance. And that's where Bill and his company come in. Some of you may know him, and I know him. I've worked with him in the past. He's a subject matter expert on this stuff. They do noise mitigation for all sorts of tricky situations, like gun ranges next to animal shelters, golf courses next to highways, when someone's trying to film a movie and they need it quiet. He is on the team, and he's here to answer any questions that you guys have. To be fair, he's new to the team, right? We can't give you fully spec'd out plans right now, but he can talk to it certainly in a level that I can't. So if you have questions about what might work or what his expertise is, he's happy to talk about that. We have, and so the additional requirement would be, we have 3 weddings left this spring. I know I may have said 2 to some of you earlier. I apologize. I've since been told it's 3. They're all over by early June. Then we don't have any until late September, right? Whatever it is Bill tells us to do, we can't get done before the end of June, but we can get it done before the end of September. So what we would ask is that we be allowed to have these last 3 weddings. Obviously, we'll be very sensitive to the music, but we be allowed to have these last 3 weddings, and then, as a condition of use, we hire a noise mitigation consultant to design, install noise mitigation measures, and then we'll test them. We'll test them before we have the fall weddings to make sure it's compliant with the noise ordinance. That's something he does regularly. He can speak to what that actually looks like. So that's an additional term that I'm happy to propose on behalf of the applicant tonight. What I would say is, frankly, that's going to cost money, right? And it's easy for me to stand here and say that my folks want to be a good neighbor. And if that's all I was doing, that might ring a little hollow, and I get that. But This is a significant investment that my folks are willing to do. We talked about other venues, right? And I realize no two are exactly the same. And you guys want uniformity in how they're treated. We do too. And they're not offering to do. They never offered to do what we're offering to do. So in terms of this separate parcel thing, my proposal, respectfully, would be that as an additional condition, and then I'll wrap up, would be that within 30 days of the granting of this permit, we apply for a second special use permit for the second parcel, so that everybody has peace of mind that we're not trying to keep the tennis courts somehow exempt from these rules. We'll bind ourselves to applying for it. If it needs to be 2 weeks, we'll do it in 2 weeks. But if you have, in the absence of any questions, I appreciate your time.
It's still open to the public hearing. I don't know if your other part of your team wants to speak a little bit to noise abatement, or if there's anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of this.
I think maybe the best use of the time, in the absence of specific questions for Bill, we'll conclude our remarks.
Well, I would like to hear an example of how he would mitigate
Sure.
the noise.
The question was, he'd like to hear just an example of how you might mitigate.
Good evening. My name is Bill Burgitis, William Burgitis. I'm CEO of Troy Acoustics. We are headquartered here in Brunswick, Georgia. We've been here for over 12 years. You may not have heard of us. We try to keep a low profile for our clients. Our clients consist of the FBI, the Secret Service, U.S. Customs, the Department of Defense throughout our nation, South Korea, Japan, Hawaii, Caribbean, United Kingdom, and Israel with the IDF. So we work with everybody and for everybody. We are the world's leading experts in shooting range acoustics. We developed the metrics that have been adopted by the DoD. We know how to handle gunfire sound level, protect the shooters and instructors from the blast overpressure, keep them safe in indoor and outdoor ranges so that you don't hear what's going on when they're training. We also work for broadcast facilities nationwide. We designed and developed the Weather Channel in Atlanta. We did the AccuWeather facility in State College, Pennsylvania. Worked for WPXI, Cox Broadcasting in Pittsburgh, WRAL, multiple TV broadcast facilities nationwide. We've also done many highway sound wall barriers for the PGA Tour, Senior Tour over in California, where the Nissan Open was being held in Valencia, California, and they had to quiet down the 8th and 9th holes and the greens so that the interstate traffic wouldn't be held. So this is what we specialize in.
Excuse me, but I think what Commissioner Booker's asking is, what do you think you can do to abate the noise?
We could quiet down the amplified sound level so it's no longer intrusive to the neighbors and the complaints go away. We actually will guarantee the performance of our acoustical designs. All of our designs have been tested and certified by Riverbank Acoustical Laboratories located in Geneva, Illinois, the most accredited sound laboratory in all of North America. This is what we do day in and day out for people throughout the world. We will guarantee our performance so that, again, the amplified sound level is not intrusive to the neighbors.
How would you go about doing that? Just is that building of walls, a
We
shelter,
have-
or I mean, I'm trying to grasp here how that might look. And I realize you haven't gone out and officially made a determination, but just kind of speaking in general to, you've got amplified music within about 300 to 1,000 feet of houses in this neighborhood. How is that possible, especially when you have such wide open spaces for the sound to travel?
Well, if we can control gunfire, we can certainly control amplified noise. Well, the way we do that is with our Troy materials, which are in our warehouse. We bring them in from Italy. We're looking to open a factory here in Georgia to manufacture these materials here in the USA. The materials are made of wood fibers and Portland cement, very similar to what you have up on your ceiling there, except our materials are impregnable to the exterior elements. They perform in wet, humid, snow, climatic conditions without degradation or deficiency in the acoustical transmission of sound from one side to the other. So thereby we absorb the sound level energy, reducing the energy within the acoustical wall design, so thereby as it transmits through, there's less energy going on the other side. Once that energy is on the other side of the wall, the distance between the barrier and the neighbors that are complaining, that adds to the,
So you're talking about building a wall?
you're talking about an acoustical barrier, not a wall.
I mean, I understand you giving us a lot of technical information, and can you just, what does it look like? Does it look like a wall, or what is it? When you say barrier, I mean, it's a ton of barriers.
It'll be a design that'll be tall enough and long enough to absorb the sound level on one side so that as it transmits through, it is completely absorbed and thereby reducing the amount of transmission or intrusive sound level that's to the neighbors. As far as what it will look like, we just design and build them. They can have landscaping over them, they can paint them, they can make them almost transparent as far as the eye is concerned by adding trees behind it or in front of it, whatever the case may be. So a lot of times the barriers that we install are not seen, just like the one at the Valencia Country Club on Interstate 5 in California. The off-ramp was for Magic Mountain Parkway. That barrier was not visible to the traffic side. It was not visible to the 9th green or the 8th green on the fairway side.
All right, thank you, sir. We appreciate it very much. Any other more questions for this gentleman?
What do you do to back up your guarantee?
What do we do to back up our guarantee?
You said you guarantee. What do you do to back that up? I mean,
We have an insurance policy, sir.
and what is the limits of that?
In excess, I think, $3 million.
Okay, that's what I meant by that. Also, I have a question. The complainant made an announcement or statement that she made the statement that it was that Musgrove said that they were exempt from this. Chris, I'd like for you to elaborate on that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thanks, Bill. My client does not think it is exempt from the zoning ordinance or the noise ordinance or any other Glynn County laws. They have been having weddings there for a while. When the county notified them that there was a zoning issue, which is sort of how this bubbled, that was the origin of my involvement. We looked at it to decide whether we think we need a special use permit. And I really don't know that that's relevant tonight, but we've never said we were exempt from anything. It doesn't have anything to do with whether we're a nonprofit or not. I think where we are now that Commissioner Rafalski has been out there, is that we've got a noise ordinance problem. It doesn't matter if my guys, it doesn't matter how they're zoned, it doesn't matter if they're a nonprofit or not, they have to comply with the noise ordinance. And so I could spend a lot of time talking about why my folks haven't tried to get special treatment. They have not knowingly violated anything. They want to comply with the laws and they want to be treated the same way other folks are. But I think where we are now is what can we do to comply with the noise ordinance? And I think that's where Troy Acoustics comes in. It'll be a meaningful investment by my folks, but we think it can work. Sorry, my last comment, someone asked about fireworks. We don't do fireworks.
Chris?
Yes, sir.
You know, we started this process last fall, and now here we're in May, and we still don't have the permit. To me, it was ignored, but, you know, you did the legal stuff. But I did go out there this past Saturday, and from the Carter's front yard, I could understand everything the band was doing. When we got to Alice Horton's, I might as well been next to the stage. So I do sympathize with them. And, you know, we talked about keeping it within the 300-foot limit. We talked about, I don't know if you've got anything you want to put forward that they're willing to do, but from what I understand right now, they won't be able to hold the events this weekend because there's no permit on the tennis courts. I don't know if there's a way that can be, here's my thing, you know, and I told Ms. Bagley, if, you know, 2 weeks, 16 days ago, whatever it was, we were at IPC. I was there, you were there, and, you know, they basically just asked to be a good neighbor. Well, first week, I wasn't in town, but I got calls all the way up till after 11 o'clock. So then this past weekend, I was at a wedding, and then I came home, and I was getting calls about 9:30, so I rode over. And as I parked at the corridors, county policeman rode by. So I stood there and listened to it there. I tried to record it, but it just can't do it well on the phone. So we were going to walk over to Miss Horton's, but instead I walked down to the policeman. And I asked him, I said, first of all, I gave him my ID so he'd know who I was. I said, is this the first complaint you've had? He said, no, we had them last weekend. So they admitted that they were there. And he had said that he had already called and they asked him to turn it down. Well, after turning it down, and he was sitting at the end of Village Drive, you could still hear everything. So, you know, I don't know if, you know, I think they said point the speakers away from German Village, point them out towards the creek. I don't know that that helps. Maybe it just bounces back. But, you know, you gotta respect their rights as well as the others. Now, I don't know what can be done for the event this weekend. Maybe the attorney can help us with that, or, you know, maybe if you have it at 10 o'clock, the noise goes to where you can't hear it. But I know when we were in Miss Horton's backyard this past Saturday, they shut all the amplification off, and I could still hear. You could just hear the instruments. So, you know, I don't know if this man can design a wall that'll work. I think the neighborhood's okay with, you know, we wanted to keep it within 300 feet. We wanted no event traffic on Village Drive. I think basically it was, the other thing was, oh darn. I think those were the two biggest. Oh, the 10 o'clock. You know, I think the neighborhood's willing, if you can turn the noise down, the neighborhood's probably willing to let it go to 11. I mean, I think they've basically told me that. So, you know, I don't know where we go from here. I know we started a long time ago and we really haven't made any headway. So.
Thank you for that. So one thing on the timing. I had a trial that was supposed to go in March. It's going to take 2 months. And I communicated that. So we couldn't appear earlier because of my conflict. And that may frustrate everybody up there. I just ask you blame me and not my client for that. Okay. You know, in terms of the weddings this weekend, it would be really unfortunate for my folks if they weren't allowed to have those events on the tennis courts. The weddings have been contracted and booked for that purpose. That's what these wedding parties have planned for. I have a lot of confidence in Mr. Brigadis because I've worked with him before. He can't get it done by this Saturday or by the end of this month. I do think we have real potential to put something in place before it starts in the fall. So if we are able to and the reason I mentioned.
But I guess my question is, if we allow the wedding, the next three, will the noise level be at such a, we won't be getting calls? These people will be able to live at peace?
I can't.
I mean, so you see,
I do. I sure do.
That's the only thing I'm after. You know.
Yeah, I certainly understand that. If Nicole is able to speak directly to what she's, you know, able to do additionally in the next 3 weeks beyond those conditions, you know, I'd be in favor of any of that. Nicole, can you hear us by chance? I don't want to delay it if she's unable to, but I can't control whether somebody calls, but I can do, you know, if we need to turn the music down at 10:30, if we need to cut amplification at 10:30, we can certainly do that.
I'd cut it at 10. I know they go to 11, but, you know, because there hadn't been any goodwill put forth until now, you know, I went out and heard it. And you know, it's, My wife gave me a fit about going over there, but that's another story. You know, I don't know. I'll let some of the others weigh in, but I do know the problem is there, and I do know that, there she is.
Nicole, can you hear us?
Yeah, you're going in and out, but yes.
So speak to it. I'm sorry, Commissioner, go ahead if you'd like.
Ms. Bagley, you know, you and I talked yesterday, and I think you know the concerns that we spoke about yesterday. The 300-foot noise limit, the 10 o'clock cutoff time. The neighborhood, if you can turn the noise down, they're willing to let you go until 11. But, you know, if this gentleman does his work and the noise complaints are still there, you'd probably lose the permit altogether. So I just want everybody to know where we are right now. But, you know, if we can keep the noise within the compound, within 300 feet, you know, last Saturday when I was there, after they turned the amplification off at Miss Horton's house, which is the closest point, you could still hear the band. I don't think we could hear it at the Carter's house at that point. But, you know, they're asking that no special events uses Village Drive, which is probably, I don't think they do that anyway. The 300-foot noise limit and, you know, 10 o'clock for right now, but, you know, if the noise is down, 11 o'clock would be all right. I think the neighborhood's actually let me know that, you know, if the noise limit's down, they don't mind it going till 11.
I mean, we will do our best to turn it down and make sure that, you know, that we are in compliance. I mean, we do not want in any way to be out of compliance with the noise ordinance. I mean, I knew that there were complaints, but I did not understand how it affected the neighbors, you know, until somebody was actually there. I have not been there. So yeah, of course. I mean, and we don't want any special treatment in any sort of way.
Nicole, are there, this is Chris, are there any specific assurances we can give about our 3 remaining weddings that we would do to keep the music lower just so we can get through the remaining spring wedding season?
I mean, we will absolutely reduce the music after 10 o'clock, as well as, I mean, I would love to bring back these off-duty officers so that they can monitor as well. We never had any complaints when they were hired, and we haven't been able to do that since this has been going on. They won't come back until this is approved.
Commissioners, if I may, one way to get through these next 3 weddings would be to have police officers on site with an understanding, a representation by us that we will turn the music down at 10, and if they think it's too loud, we'll turn it down until they don't think it's too loud anymore. And if we think we're putting a police officer in an uncomfortable position, we can structure it however you'd like. I realize there may be a concern that if someone's there for us, maybe they're, you know, going to find themselves in an uncomfortable position. That's not what we're aiming for either. Anybody that we want to vest with that authority, that tells us to turn it down at 10, and if it's not low enough, we turn it down further. If that's a way to get through this spring and give us time to get our consultant to work this summer, I think it makes sense.
I'm going to do something here, Commissioners. Basically, I'm going to ask this. I'm going to close the public hearing at this point, and then I would like, if any of you have any specific questions for anybody on either side of the issue, to ask that question. There seems to be a lot of back and forth here. I think it's only fair that if we're going to ask these kind of questions, I'd like to hear from both sides. So I think we're going to close the public hearing. At this point, the public hearing is closed. I'm going to open the floor now to commissioners. If you have any specific questions for anyone on either side, to ask those questions at this point.
Ms. Carter, would you like to come back up? Now, you've heard what's been presented. Is the neighborhood okay with that?
What exactly is being presented? It's kind of, I'm a little unclear, that they're going to try to keep the noise down and that they're
Yes.
going to, they're not going to. I mean, there's no guarantee. There's no one there to enforce it. The band is there, the planner's there. There's no accountability. I don't want someone's wedding to be ruined. I just want the fact that this has been drug out for this long. I want something to be done. I mean, it's not fair for that this has been continuing this long. I just think it's ridiculous.
But it appears to me that if we can provide an officer or two to make sure of to monitor, have them pay for it, since it might be overtime or something. But I think we have officers who would be have the integrity to make sure that they're in compliance, even though they're paying for their overtime. Just to get through this period, I think. And to me, I don't know who would be a better monitor of this, because they could close it down if they are not compliant.
That's actually what happened this past Saturday.
Well, and so when I do weddings at venues that are private venues, I usually do a off-duty officer that I pay directly, because it's more just to show the county or wherever the area is that we're trying to work within the ordinances and show respect, whatever. So I do that. The problem, I think, is that, and I think Nicole was saying, though, that they're not even willing to go out there right now because of this ongoing issue. And it's kind of a conflict of interest, too, if there's one working out there and somebody else is calling. I mean, I'm not saying it won't work. I guess I want to see
I
is.
think what I'm saying is somebody dedicated to this event, not just an officer that's on duty for the
Oh,
general
yeah, no, I
public.
understand that, yeah. Yeah.
And so it would be, per se, an off-duty police officer or two to make sure that it's monitored. But the county doesn't pay for that. They pay
Sure, no,
for
yeah,
it.
that's right, I understand.
And I think we have officers that would have the integrity to make sure that they're
Sure.
compliant. And they just have to let the folk who are holding the event know that if they're not compliant, it's going to be shut down.
So I guess my question is, though, that how do they enforce that? Are they going to have to leave their property and go within so many feet? Because it's the noise, the distance, I guess, that's the issue, right?
Well, maybe that's why you have more than one. They got radios, and one can go and double check it periodically.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think this is rocket scientist stuff like what this guy was saying about the barriers. But I think just to get through this right now, and
It's either that or they can't have their weddings.
Well, so I guess, can I ask a question, though, about it?
Yes.
So if we were to say, okay, sure, then what happens next? How much longer are they going to string this out? That's kind of where I'm going with it. Like, how much long? I mean, this has been going on for so long. Why are they? Have they been approved for the permit? Are they being? I mean, where?
That's what we're doing tonight.
Well, I think we could probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mumford, issue a temporary special use permit through the end of June. And then at that point, the permit would become null and void, and any other activities out there would be out of compliance. Am I correct in understanding that, or am I surmising that incorrectly?
I think the board could do a 3, 6, 1-year conditional or special use permit. The only caveat to that, though, is if you do a 3-month permit, the process will need, I mean, you're going to have to issue a new special use permit after that. So the process would need to start back over again in terms of planning commission and back to the board commissioners with public hearings.
So we can't issue a temporary with a come back to revisit this after the 3 weddings?
I think you could defer, I mean, I think you can defer tonight's action and then just let them know that the board is okay with these 3 events under these conditions. But I think if you You're disposing of the application before you in one form or another. So if you want to defer that until June and see how the next 3 events go with these conditions on it, or these, place, officers out there take note of the noise. But if you dispose of tonight's application and say, we're only going to allow you to do 3 months,
I'm talking 3 weeks.
or 3 weeks, I'm sorry, three weeks, then essentially you've disposed of the application by giving them a 3-week special use permit.
But aren't they going to have to come back for the tennis courts anyway here? So they really come back for it all?
I think that depends on how the board addresses that tonight. So if the board wants to see how that is implemented, how it works, you might want to do a 3-week or 6-month temporary permit, see the plans, see how it's going to work, and then revisit it. That is an option as well.
I mean, I agree the comment that this thing has gone a lot slower than any of us thought or hoped. And I was involved in some of those early discussions, and the encouragement has been to the Bren Foundation is that they need to get in compliance.
Yes.
As a father of 2 daughters, and then you as a wedding planner know, at this late date, I would hate to have one of their happiest days in their lives really thrown in upheaval in a short period of time. That's why I think Commissioner Rafalski is trying to find, and I think we are as a commission, how can we find some kind of way maybe to get through the next 3 weeks, but at the same time, what's happening is not acceptable.
Right.
And it can't continue to go forward, and you and the whole neighborhood do not have to and should not have to experience that week in and week out. As Commissioner Rafalski, who texted me last 2 weekends about the noise, I mean, it does carry weight with us because we live it too.
I actually went over there, so, are those, I guess, Ms. Bagley, are those next 3 weddings all in May?
There's 2 in May and 1 at the beginning of June.
I know there's one this weekend. I mean, I know the family.
Chris, how many what wedding dates are next, or do they have dates for weddings?
We have the dates.
Nicole can help me. There is one this Saturday, and the last one I think is June 4th. And then the interim wedding is Nicole, please help me. It's at the end of May? Is that right? Is the second wedding May 14th? I think you're on mute.
I'm looking it up right this second.
While she's looking, I would just briefly note, if the commission's thinking about a temporary thing, 3 weeks might not do it. If the last one is June 4th, it might.
I think that's the reason for the question.
Yeah.
I believe May 13th.
So we have one this weekend, which is May 7th. May 7th. Another one, May 14th, is that correct?
Yeah, yes, and then
June
the
4th?
the first weekend in June.
So that's actually, is that the 4th? Is that June 4th? Does
Yes.
anyone have that?
Yes.
So there's 3 weddings, that's all you have left, is that correct, Chris?
Yes, sir.
Till September.
Till September?
Till, late September, I believe.
Okay. Let me ask you this, and sorry I can't pronounce the gentleman's name behind you, but who is with Troy Acoustics.
Yes, sir.
Is there any way he, with the materials that he have, may be able to prepare something temporarily that would be a help buffer over the next 3 or 4 weeks? If you have acoustic tiles that can be put around the area?
Temporarily, we could erect a barrier, but it's got to be approved by your building department.
And it would be approved by the building department because it's the weight of the barrier, is that what I'm hearing?
Well, just you're erecting a temporary fence, temporary barrier to absorb noise. So yeah, you can do that. It's, any fence above 6 feet needs a building permit, I believe.
Ms. Thompson, can you speak to that?
Good evening, Pamela Thompson, Director of Community Development. He is correct, any fence over 6 foot needs a permit. I can assure you that if the plans are submitted, we will have it reviewed and a permit issued.
And so you're saying your fence, just as a temporary solution, would be over 6 feet, is that correct?
Oh, yes.
Just out of curiosity, just guessing, what kind of height are you talking about? 12 feet?
I'm assuming taller than that.
Do you know there's marsh and river behind? There's nothing to stop sound from going that way. So, I mean, it's really carrying in 360 degrees.
Again, the design would have to be involving the neighbors that are complaining and position the barrier so that you absorb the sound level and it becomes less intrusive that direction. The other directions, I mean, and I would have to go out and take a look and if all conditions and verify it, but yeah, we're looking at maybe a 3-sided kind of backstop.
So he hasn't seen it yet, Chris?
No, sir, he hasn't. We've talked about it, we've looked at some images, but he hasn't been there yet.
Okay.
I would just add briefly, and then I'll sit down. We do have land on our property. It is woods back there. So there is land. Obviously, the creek is right there, and he'll have to figure out the extent to which that is an impediment that, we can be dealt with. One of the things we did talk about is like you can build something in the woods, and then you can also control something closer to the source of the sound. And I think the way to maybe deal with mitigate the creek effect is to do something there closer to the tennis courts. It can be made to look decorative, perhaps, but that is actually some sort of mitigation measure.
Ms. Burns, would you like to come forward?
I guess we're a little unclear because we live further out, and I know that's why we were concerned about the marsh too, because when the creek curves right there, we're more on that end, and we're almost a half mile away, and my son last Saturday night was in his room in the upstairs that faces that way, and we're the farthest house from the venue, and he had to put in his earbuds in his own room in our house. So yeah, it was very loud. And I guess our question is, you're talking about a temporary use permit for the use, but you can't grant a temporary permit for a noise violation. So we're still back where we started over the next 3 weeks or 4 weeks. What about the noise? And we talked about, you mentioned turning it off at 10. Well, before 10, it's very loud. We're looking at Mother's Day Saturday, we sort of like the peace and quiet of our own, with our families visiting and everything else, things we're doing in our backyards and on our porches and our yards too. I fully respect that somebody's got an event, but it's been over a year since the since the complaint was filed with the county, and events were actively booked during that 12-month period. So that's a concern. It's like we're not the bad guys here. We've been patiently waiting. I do feel for those people, and if there's a way that we can use non-amplified music, because we're willing, if we don't hear it, party on. Do whatever you want on your property. But the problem is it's so loud and amplified. It carries. I don't know if it's the geography. I don't know if it's the features, but it really carries. Yeah, but that's going to be the hard part, yeah, because, I've sat there at our door, we're a half mile away, and you can hear every word, you can get it on your phone, and if you like the music that night, it's not bad, but if you don't, or if you've got some other company or something else going on, it's not that great. But I guess if we could reduce the music, but not wait till 10 and turn it down, because it's before 10 that's an issue too, because it's so loud. It's like one night I thought somebody had pulled into our driveway with their music turned up, and was sitting there, boom, boom, and it's like, who is in our yard? But it's not. You've heard it. You've experienced. Yeah, you've heard that one, and I wish I'd brought it to play for everyone. So I guess we're worried about also the time before 10, if this is going to happen, because the noise is the issue, not the use. It's the noise. And then also, they've already been booking there. Well, you were there over there at Miss Horton's and the Carters. Yeah, it's still loud, and maybe stop that at 10, just cut off the music at 10. Yeah, but just not at that level, because I've often wondered, how do those people even hear? If we're hearing it this loud, and every single word and the bass and everything else is sometimes, almost vibrating outside, how can they even leave their hearing anymore, the people at the event? So, I mean, Caroline, you can tell me too, Ann, you live there, others that couldn't be here, Ms. Horton especially, and other elderly residents who are homebound and listening, so, and can't get out on their porch and without listening to it. So if there's something that could be done, but I know that just a temporary use permit will not solve the problem.
Well, I think what we're saying is if the problem can't be solved, it'll have to stop. I think that's right.
I mean, I don't hate for someone's wedding and event to be, special event to be canceled,
I'd really
but
try to see if we could work to find some kind of common ground here
Compromise.
tonight on these three events. I just think it's unfair to those families, right or wrong, whether they should have been booked. They're right there. I understand.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I understand we're not in the position we'd like to be in at this point, but at the same time, from my personal opinion, if we can try to find some kind of compromise on these three events, with the understanding after June 4th, no more. And you're going to have to come back or come to us and demonstrate that you have a sound plan if you're going to continue to have amplified music out there that is able to buffer the sound so it's not a problem for the neighborhood.
I don't know that this would be a suggestion that could be done, but if the event could be moved from the tennis courts over the other way, I'm just asking.
Was the amplified music last 2 weekends pointed at the marsh or pointed away from German Village? Does anyone know?
Nicole may be able to speak to it better than me. My understanding is that it was pointed away from German Village.
And there's a tent out there for where they'll be playing this time. Is that correct? There's a tent for this particular weekend. Is that what I'm?
On Saturday, I don't know that to be true. Nicole, is there a tent for this Saturday?
There is a tent, and it's already erected.
Okay. And so I guess one of the questions I had for the gentleman from Troy Acoustics is, it seems like to me if the sound is pointed away from German Village, could we not fence in the inside of that tent or the backside of that tent between the neighborhood and the stage with the idea that the music will be turned down to a good bit more than it has been in the past, and would that not help in some manner?
Oh, yes, yeah. I mean, the sound source is going this way. You're still going to have a little bit of noise going back the other direction, but that can be mitigated by additional duvetine hanging down behind that along the curtain, between the curtain or between the noise source and the neighbors, and that'll reduce sound level as well. So yeah, you can do a temporary immediate fix for this event.
How many people are booked for this event this weekend? Could it be moved or the tent's up?
For this weekend, the tent is up. It is about 200 people.
Okay. You don't really have anywhere else you could move it to accommodate 200 people, right?
In the future.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty big tent that takes days to put up, so I'm not sure if they can take it down and then put it up somewhere else for this event.
Are there any other event venues over there that are a problem, have ever been a problem? None of the others?
no, we don't have one. The one further north, we don't hear anything from there. That's the only thing closest to us.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to speak specific to this application, but I'll speak to the principle of SUPs that have grown, and the wedding industry has grown, and the places they're held, and bands. And there's nobody that hadn't walked out on the beach or the pier at St. Simon's on a calm night and heard the sea buoy 1.5 miles and 2 miles, 3 miles out down the channel. So sound on a sound night, quiet night, travels. It also, with the wind, travels. All of the event places that we have, these same discussions have been held. That's why I asked Pam and the staff to put together the little clip that you saw of the allowed permitted music. And those complaints still go on today. It's just that the neighbors and these event sites have settled into a kind of accommodation for each other. Take Mullet Bay in the Village. We had loads of complaints about the sound going into the neighborhoods back behind Parker's. You and I met with people that complain about the sounds in the casino when they're having parties at the casino. Captain's Bluff is a good example in the Commons. You know, there's the ordinance over there. When the wind is quiet or not, that alone amplifies the ability of sound to travel. All of our cited places, we've had this long history of these same discussions. I just encourage the commission to do what we've done with the other applicants. I mean, I get calls from Harrington for Village Creek on a quiet night. The Village Creek landing way out there on that peninsula roars sound back into Harrington. So it's just, I think that our best is to do what you're trying to do, is work something out on a temporary basis and come back and do it time. But what I'm telling you is that the solution of noise and wind dynamics and location goes on every weekend on this island in all of these permitted places. And it's just become a problem like sort of what we feel about short-term rentals and the impact in neighborhoods.
One thing I would like to add to that, you're saying, you know, these places are there, but the radius you saw where people might still hear it, that was the 100 and the 300, which are in the ordinance. If you saw that same radius, which was not drawn for Musgrove, even from the tennis court, we wouldn't be in them. So we still shouldn't be hearing them. And it's not a quiet night, it's every time. And I guess the thing that's sort of aggravated us at this point, we're in this situation because during the 12 months, after 13 months now, after the ordinance was supposed to be enforced, because you were talking about permitted venues. This is still not permitted. This happened. These were booked. And you see how 800% increase. That's not just the occasional noise. That's an intensity of use increase as well, not just noise. So that's what we've got going on here. It's every weekend. And so 16 weekends with some to come probably if there's open dates in the fall. So I guess that's what we're saying. This is not just something all of a sudden we're like, oh, we hear noise. There is more noise. Yeah, and one of the things that we've ran into with the officers who've been wonderful, they've been wonderful and very accommodating and very patient. But one of the things they say, the way it's currently done, unlike the short-term rentals, where if you get multiple complaints about a short-term rental, they can lose their license. It's the property owner that's cited. But under the way that this is being enforced with the special event venues, or at least in this case, the officer said the clock starts over every event. Only the vendor is cited, not the property owner. And so every time we play this game, every time, starts over and over and over. So that's something that really needs to be looked at in this case, not just for this case, but for all of them. How's this going to be enforced, or else we're going to be chasing our tail every time? And that's something that needs to be looked at as well, but obviously not tonight.
That's my point, for all the events, everywhere.
But we're the existing neighborhood. If I'm down near Mullet Bay, I'm going to expect some noise, but not here and now. And so that's one of the things that's a change here. Because as long as Musgrove's been there, German Village was there longer. So that's just something we'd point out. And I guess tonight we're trying to find out, is the permit going to be approved for the parcel that was in the application for the main compound? And if that's the case, we'd like to see those 5 conditions that Caroline had in her letter and in her speech. imposed. And then the tennis court is another issue because that was not part of the formal application. And then if that's a temporary one, we still want to see the noise ordinance. And what do we do if there is a violation? Who do we call? What do we do? Or are we just basically being told for the next 3 to 6 weeks, deal with it?
Ann, did you have a question?
Come up. Miss Ann, can you come up, please?
If you, because the parcel where the noise is a real problem is not even part of all this discussion, how can they still hold an event on a parcel that they don't have a permit to hold the event? That's my question. How are we letting it go on when it's on a parcel that you're not even voting on tonight? I would prefer it say, I'm sorry, you can do what you want to do, but it can't be on those tennis courts because you didn't apply for a permit there. That's all I had to say.
Chris, are there any other, after June, are there any other events, non-wedding events planned at Musgrove?
Nicole, can you answer that? I'm sorry, Commissioner, I don't know.
I mean, they are, if we do have them, they are smaller events. They're inside. They're nonprofit events. There are people that are staying there. They're doing strategic plans in different organizations like that. So there's no events.
No other outside events in that area, is that correct?
Yeah, no events like the weddings. Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I think, are the other two weddings as big as the one this Saturday?
Sorry, what, I couldn't hear you.
Are the other two weddings, the 14th and the 4th, are they as big as the one this Saturday? 200, please?
Yeah.
They are?
Yeah, I believe that they are.
Is there any way those could be moved to another area instead of the tennis courts?
I mean, possibly the second one would be from my understanding, the third one is will have an enclosed tent, completely enclosed, so that should help with the noise. But I don't know. I'd have to look at their contract, but I don't believe so, but possibly.
Well, you know, they make a real good point. It's not part of the application, so I don't know how it got missed, but it got missed.
All right, you're done? Any other comments? Mr. Jordan, one final comment or anything? Anything you want to say?
No, sir. In the absence of any questions, we appreciate your consideration.
Okay. Ms. Leaf, do you have something for us? Or are you just walking over there just to get ready, huh?
Ready.
Chief, is there any issues, let me ask you this, if the suggestion has been made to have multiple officers, off-duty officers on site to help monitor the music on these three events, is that a possibility? Is that going to be an issue?
It shouldn't be. What we would have to do is just make sure we have more than one officer, one obviously inside the venue. Second officer could be positioned at a 300-foot level, and then, or distance. And if that noise is such at a level that that outside officer is finding it intrusive, then he can radio in, hey, they need to drop it down. They'll get one warning maybe, and if that doesn't work, then we'll have to close down the event.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
It was a time when we used decibel levels to register what was considered intrusive and not. It's basically now what you can hear with the naked ear. Yes, ma'am. What's going to have to happen is that officer outside the perimeter is going to just have to use a good faith method for determining, hey, if I'm hearing it all the way out here, it's obviously too loud. I'm radioing in to my secondary officer. They have one time to turn it down. And if I'm still hearing it at the level I'm hearing it out here, it's going to be a problem. It technically should be because the rules, as was stated earlier, between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m., it's a 300-foot. So at 300 feet, that's where the cutoff point should be. If it is still intrusive beyond a 300-foot level, we would have to upgrade how we deal with that situation.
Chief, this past Saturday, when I was there, when I walked down to the unit, I forget the policeman's name, he said that he had already asked them to turn it down.
Yes, sir.
Well, we were sitting at the end of Village Drive, and you could hear it,
Yes, sir.
just like you were over.
Yes, sir.
So then we went behind Miss Horton's house, and I spoke with her.
Yes, sir.
They cut all amplification, but you could still hear it behind her house, and that's 700 feet away. So I don't know the solution. I mean, if this gentleman's got a solution.
With all due respect, sir, what's happening here is absolutely correct. Each event that's being held at Musgrove Plantation is a separate event. We have to really focus in on not the person who's necessarily having the event, but who's also allowing the event. There needs to be an adequate staff member there that's governing for the equities of the property, Musgrove Plantation, but they have to be an ethically driven person to know that the rules are clearly stated. If I am hearing it at this point, then I need to be an active participant in maintaining the noise peace levels. We can still have the officers there, but I think it would be a good gesture if Musgrove Plantation also had a manager on site during the event. That would be the emissary from their property to go over and say, look, I'm the manager at this site, you need to turn it down. If they continue to be a problem, we would then step in.
Do you have anybody on site, Ms. Bagley?
Yeah, of course, we do. We have quite a few people on site.
That belong to you, right? Not the event planner?
Yeah. We
Okay,
have, we always have
they could
we
help,
always-
so they would be the contact that the police would call? Because this past weekend, they called somebody and they talked to the band. Band turned it down a little bit, but it still wasn't enough. So when the amplification was cut, you could still hear it about 700 feet away. And I know noise travels, sound travels, so. But if there's somebody that could be responsible that, we made a good point that, maybe Ms. Burns, we only hold the event or the band. If the band got a ticket, the event coordinator got a ticket, and the foundation got a ticket, it might be a little more impactful.
Yes, sir. Commissioner, if I might, I'm sorry, go ahead, ma'am. No, I was going to say, if I might add, the equities of everyone involved would then be on the table, because what has happened is we have a challenge, that officer on the scene, with determining who should I be talking to? Am I talking to the event planner? Am I talking to the band leader? Am I talking to the groom, the bride? Who am I talking to? So by the time we figure that out, 20, 30 minutes have gone by alone. So if we know automatically, either through policy or through design, that in the future, if there is an issue or problem, Musgrove Plantation LLC, or however it's addressed, is on the table, along with the coordinator for the event is on the table, and the band is on the table. That if you violate beyond this certain code, there will be a penalty. That is, all three of you will address. Now, if Musgrove wants to go ahead and absorb the entire cost and take it from the group at a later date, that's fine, we could do it that way also. But there are equitable ways of doing this to allow the event to go on, but also to protect the equities of the community as well.
Mr. Chairman, I'm ready to make a motion.
It has, well, you asked me a question, sir. I'm not here to debate the permit for the tennis court. They asked me a direct question for the event.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Any questions for the attorney? I think I hear that we have someone who wants to make a motion. Mr. Mumford, are there any thoughts before we make a motion?
I don't know, in terms of trying to reconcile the different issues that are before the board tonight. I think you You know, and we've had a situation like this before where we've had events and weddings planned, but the county disagree with the use, and where the county has, as part of a reconciliation effort to get them compliant and avoid future, you know, to avoid shutting down a wedding and affecting, bride and groom's wedding night, to allow certain events to go forward while they are gaining compliance. While that's not the ideal action, I think the board has discretion on how you enforce that provision. So if the idea is you want to look at this further and see what the plans are, and the board's discretion is not to shut these things down, and you're going to enforce it in a way that allows these to go forward under certain conditions, I think you have that discretion legally as a board to not shut these next 3 down and still not approve it tonight. If you wanted to wait until after this process happened, find out more information about the barriers, how those worked, before you make a final decision on that, I think you can do that. Again, I know that's not a great answer, but the county does have different enforcement options at its disposal, and you don't have to shut it down. You don't have to shut this down. You can tell them, we're going to enforce this ordinance, and we're going to, maybe you have things shut down at 10, or noise monitored at 10. As Chris pointed out, you could have that officer address it at the spot. That it needs to go down lower until it is either not audible beyond 300 feet or it's shut off. But I would have to, I think, hear from Chris some more on their commitment to do that. But I think you do have, it's not one or the other, that if you don't approve it tonight, you must shut these things down. I think you legally have discretion as a board to determine what is in the best interest of the board to enforce these ordinances and how to get those to that compliance.
How do we deal with the fact about the tennis court? And if there's an event going on, but they're not permitted?
If I may, that'll be part of my motion. At least hear my motion. And then.
The tennis court parcel is going to have to come back to the board and under a different application. I don't think you can add that to the special use permit tonight without it changing it fundamentally. So, our advice and recommendation is to have that, to get that part compliant, to have that go through separately and been brought back up to y'all. But I don't have an answer in terms of how to address, to include that tonight, because I don't think you should or can without changing the application fundamentally.
Mr. Fendig, do you have something to say or a motion?
Sure. First of all, the Bren Foundation has never written me a check of any kind for the large number of years that I've provided transportation out there. So there's no fiduciary relationship with them at all. All of those payments have been through wedding coordinators or event organizers, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit. I think it's clear what needs to happen to everybody. It's just we need to do it. My motion is going to be to recommend issuance of a temporary special use permit for 3 events, 3 weddings. And the tennis courts are not included in that. Whoever's mistake that was, we'll have to find that out, but that's not a part of the SUP application. And they'll have to make arrangements on the property that is temporarily permitted to do whatever they need to. The motion does include police being on duty and the sound decibel requirements be held to. And the police has the authority to make that action and shut an event down. Correct, Chief? That's right. So that's the motion I'm preparing to make, but I want to give it to other commissioners if there's any further discussion.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Commissioners, we have a motion on the floor, and correct me, I want to make sure I'm stating it correctly, Commissioner Fendig, to issue, and Commissioner Mumford, Attorney Mumford, if we've got something that we are not allowed to do, let us know. But the motion is to allow 3 special use permits for the upcoming 3 events. I assume that meant, you mean the May 6th, May 14th, and June 4th events?
Correct.
To allow a special use permit for those 3 events. That special use permit will only be for the area that is in the application, does not include the tennis courts, is that correct?
Correct.
And that as part of the special use permit, that they are required to have 2 officers, off-duty officers on there on property, is that correct?
That's correct.
Was there any other conditions that you had with it?
Nope, the message is that you can come back and get you a new SUP. You can work on your wall and all the other issues and questions that have come up tonight, the tennis courts, and take care of the business. And the neighbors have complained. This property has gone on for quite a while without a permit. It does have a permit application now. We went through the same thing with Captain's Bluff and all the other ones. So, you know, we're going to let you finish out these 3 wedding events, and then you got to get your act together and get it right. In the meantime, Chief, you have clear understandings that if your officers have complaints from the neighborhood, that you'll take appropriate actions.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. Do we have any further discussion, Commissioners?
That also includes the 10 o'clock shutdown time for music. Sorry.
I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
go ahead, Mr. Mumford.
I just have a question. I want to make sure that I'm clear on it, that the intent after this vote would be to have them go back through this process for a permanent SUP, special use permit, after these 3 events.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
That's
So,
correct. They have to do the due diligence like any other applicant would.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Passes 5-1. Got where we were. No, I'm sorry, we are on item number 33, is that correct? Appointments. Consider appointing 3 citizens to serve on the Glynn County Veterans Memorial Park Committee. The term begins immediately and to end December 31st, 2025. I will open, let's see, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mumford, these are nominations that need to be made from the floor, is that correct?
Correct.
By the commissioners?
Correct.
Michael Browning.
We have a nomination for Michael Browning,
Nominate Robert Morrison.
nomination for Robert Morrison. I nominate Nick Hart. We'll vote on all 3 of those names at this point. All in favor of Michael Browning, please raise your right hand. That's unanimous. Robert Morrison, please raise your right hand. Unanimous. Nick Hart, please raise your right hand. Unanimous. Item 34, consider appointing 1 citizen to serve on the Glynn County Veterans Memorial Park Committee. The term begins immediately and ends December 31st, 2023. Do I have any nominations from the floor?
Jerry Ryan.
Any other nominations? If not, all in favor of Jerry Ryan, please raise your right hand. That passes unanimously. Do we have any executive session, Mr. Attorney? Well, you are a good man. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, motion to adjourn.
Have a motion. Second. We have a motion by Commissioner Falsky, a second by Commissioner Booker. All in favor, raise your right hand. That is unanimous. This meeting is adjourned.